The story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal is set against a backdrop of spiritual crisis. The land of Israel was in turmoil, not just politically, but spiritually. The people were torn between their ancient faith in Yahweh and the seductive allure of Baal worship. The kingdom of Israel, under the rule of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, had abandoned the one true God. They worshipped Baal instead. This shift was not just a change in religious practice, but a profound transformation in the cultural and moral fabric of the nation. Baal was a Canaanite deity associated with fertility and the weather. He was believed to have the power to bring rain and ensure bountiful harvests, which were crucial for the agrarian society of ancient Israel. The Israelites believed he controlled the rain and the harvest. This belief led many to turn away from Yahweh, hoping that Baal would provide for their needs and secure their prosperity. Jezebel was determined to stamp out the worship of Yahweh, the God of Israel. She was a fervent devotee of Baal and used her influence to promote his worship throughout the kingdom. She persecuted the prophets of Yahweh and promoted the worship of Baal. Many prophets were forced into hiding, and the faithful were oppressed under her rule. Elijah was a prophet of God. He was a solitary figure, often found in the wilderness, praying and seeking guidance from Yahweh. His mission was clear: to call the people back to the true worship of God. He was a powerful figure who stood against the idolatry and wickedness of his time. Elijah's courage and unwavering faith made him a formidable opponent to the forces of Baal. He challenged Ahab and Jezebel. In a dramatic confrontation, Elijah boldly declared the power and sovereignty of Yahweh, denouncing the false gods and the corruption they brought. He called them to account for their actions. Elijah's words were not just a rebuke, but a call to repentance, urging the king and queen to turn back to the true God. He warned them of God's judgment. Elijah's prophecies were dire, foretelling the consequences of their apostasy and the impending divine retribution if they did not change their ways. Elijah appeared before King Ahab. He announced that there would be a drought in the land. He said it would continue until the people turned back to God. The drought was severe. It lasted for 3.5 years. The land withered. The people suffered greatly. Ahab blamed Elijah for the drought. He sought to kill him. Elijah, however, was protected by God. He hid from Ahab's wrath. After 3 years, God commanded Elijah to return to Ahab. He was to challenge the prophets of Baal to a contest. The purpose of this contest was to demonstrate who the true God was. Elijah issued his challenge. He proposed a test that would reveal the power of God. The contest took place on Mount Carmel. It was a prominent location visible from miles around. Ahab and all the people of Israel gathered to witness this showdown between Elijah and the prophets of Baal. 450 prophets of Baal came. They were eager to prove the power of their God. Elijah addressed the people. He challenged the prophets of Baal to prepare a sacrifice. He told them to call on their God to send fire from heaven to consume it. They agreed and began their ritual. They danced around their altar, chanting and shouting to Baal. The prophets of Baal continued their frantic efforts all morning long. They shouted and cried out to their God. They even cut themselves with knives in a desperate attempt to get Baal's attention. However, there was no response. No fire came down from heaven. Elijah mocked them. He suggested that perhaps their God was sleeping or on a journey. He challenged them to shout louder. Perhaps Baal was busy and just needed a bit of prompting. The prophets of Baal worked themselves into a frenzy. They continued their frantic rituals until noon. Still, there was no answer. This is a story of faith, determination, and divine intervention. At noon, Elijah, the prophet of the Lord, stepped forward with unwavering confidence. He began by repairing an old altar of the Lord that had been torn down by those who had turned away from God. Elijah carefully selected 12 stones, each representing one of the 12 tribes of Israel, the descendants of Jacob. With these stones, he built a new altar in the name of the Lord, a symbol of unity and faith. He then dug a deep trench around the altar, a task that required both effort and precision. Elijah prepared his sacrifice, a young bull, as was the custom in those times to honor God. He placed the wood on the altar, arranging it carefully, and then laid the bull on top, ready for the offering. But then Elijah did something completely unexpected that left the onlookers in awe. He asked the people to bring him 12 large jars of water, a request that seemed unusual for a sacrificial ritual. The people obeyed, and Elijah had them pour the water over the sacrifice and the wood, drenching everything until the trench around the altar was filled with water. By doing this, Elijah was making it abundantly clear that he was not relying on any trickery or hidden flames. He wanted everyone to know that what was about to happen would be a true act of God, a miracle that could not be explained by human means. His faith was unshakable, and his actions were a testament to his trust in the Lord's power. The crowd watched in anticipation, their curiosity piqued and their hearts filled with wonder. They knew that something extraordinary was about to unfold before their eyes. The sky began to darken, and a sense of impending divine intervention filled the air. Elijah stood firm, ready to call upon the Lord to demonstrate his power and glory. With intense focus and unwavering devotion, Elijah began to pray, calling upon the Lord to answer him and show the people that he is the true God. Suddenly flames descended from the sky, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water in the trench. It was a powerful display of divine power, leaving no doubt that the Lord had answered Elijah's prayer. The crowd fell to their knees, worshipping in awe and proclaiming, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" Elijah's faith and prayer had brought about a miraculous demonstration of God's power. With the sacrifice prepared and the crowd watching intently, Elijah prayed to the Lord. He prayed with confidence and authority. He reminded God of his covenant with Israel. He acknowledged that he and the people were God's servants. He pleaded with God to show himself strong on their behalf. He asked God to answer his prayer so that the people would know that he was the one true God. As Elijah finished his prayer, the fire of the Lord fell from heaven. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and even licked up the water in the trench. The display of God's power was undeniable. The people who had watched in stunned silence were overcome with awe. They fell prostrate on the ground and cried out, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" Elijah had proven beyond any doubt that Yahweh, not Baal, was the true God. He had answered Elijah's prayer in a spectacular and undeniable way. This dramatic display of God's power had a profound impact on the people. They had witnessed the emptiness of Baal worship. They had seen the awesome power of the one true God. They were ready to turn back to him. With the people fully convinced, Elijah turned his attention to the prophets of Baal. He ordered them seized. They were taken down to the Kishon Valley. There they were executed for leading the people astray. Their deaths marked a turning point. The worship of Baal began to wane in Israel. The story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal is not just a story of conflict between two gods. It's a story about the faithfulness of God. It highlights the consequences of idolatry. It reminds us that there is only one true God. He alone is worthy of our worship and devotion. This story, though ancient, holds valuable lessons for us today. It is a timeless narrative that transcends the ages, offering wisdom and guidance that is as relevant now as it was centuries ago. The ancient texts and manuscripts we see are not just relics of the past. They are living documents that speak to the human condition and our relationship with the divine. It reminds us that God is alive and active in our world. The rising sun over ancient ruins symbolizes the ever-present light of God in our lives, illuminating our path and guiding us through the darkness. The light shining through the ancient temple is a metaphor for divine presence, a reminder that God's Spirit dwells among us. He is not a distant deity who is uninvolved in our lives. Instead, he is intimately involved in our daily struggles and triumphs. The images of prayer in desolate places remind us that no matter where we are, God is there listening and caring for us. He is a God who hears our prayers. Whether they are whispered in solitude or cried out in desperation, He is a God who hears our prayers. The close-up of hands in prayer signifies the personal and intimate connection we can have with the divine. Praying near a candle in an ancient room evokes a sense of timelessness, showing that prayer has been a cornerstone of human experience throughout history. He answers them in His own time and in His own way. The time lapse of the sun setting and clouds moving across the sky illustrates the passage of time and the unfolding of God's plan. The man waiting in the desert symbolizes patience and faith, trusting that God's answers will come, even if they are not immediate. The story also challenges us to examine our own lives. Are we living in a way that reflects our commitment to God? The scenes of reflection and meditation in ancient settings encourage us to take a step back and evaluate our spiritual journey. Are we fully committed to God, or are we allowing distractions and idols to divide our allegiance? Are we fully committed to God? The act of kneeling in prayer and looking up in contemplation are powerful symbols of surrender and devotion. Raising hands in worship signifies a heart that is open and fully dedicated to the divine. Or are we divided in our allegiance, trying to serve both God and the idols of this world? The imagery of idols in an ancient market and a person turning away from them highlights the constant temptation to stray from our faith. Standing at a crossroads represents the choices we must make daily, choosing between the path of righteousness and the distractions of the world. The story of Elijah is a source of encouragement and hope. The ancient prophet raising his hands is a powerful image of faith and divine connection. Standing on a mountaintop symbolizes the heights of spiritual achievement and the clarity that comes from being close to God. It reminds us that God is faithful. The rainbow over the ancient landscape is a symbol of God's promises, a sign that He will never forsake us. The sun breaking through the clouds represents hope and renewal, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, God's light will shine through. He will never abandon His people. The shepherd guiding sheep is a metaphor for God's guidance and care. A parent hugging a child signifies the unconditional love and protection that God offers. Open arms in welcome illustrate God's readiness to embrace us, no matter how far we've strayed. Even when we stray from Him, He's always ready to welcome us back with open arms. The journey back to the ancient village symbolizes our return to faith, and the embrace signifies reconciliation and forgiveness. God's open arms are a constant invitation to come back to Him, to find solace and peace in His unwavering love. If you enjoyed this story and the lessons it teaches, please consider liking this video, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to our channel for more inspiring content. Thank you for watching.